Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
And we are here, and the phone has dropped, and we are here at our first retreat at Stonyhurst with our lovely guests ahead of us. We wanted to...
Can we everyone raise the back of their hands and do a little wave and cheer? Hey,
Here we are.
There we go. Excellent. More like a football team.
We thought we might begin by discussing this commencement address by Harrison Butker, who is the lead kicker, is that a phrase? A lead kicker of the American football team that won the Super Bowl. And he's just given a commencement address.
Yes, because we all know everything about American football.
We're very well versed on American football.
Let's go with lead kicker.
It's like rugby with pads, I think, isn't it?
And Kate.
Rugby with, if you're for scared people.
Rugby for Americans.
Yeah.
While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media, all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. You know, the difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition. We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice.
So he's given this address, and in it it was brilliant, I thought. And in it he was quite tough on the bishops and the priests, and it was very much about staying in your lane, knowing your vocation, whether it be as a husband, a father, a wife, a mother, a priest, a bishop, and how he feels that we've been let down in the church by our bishops and some of our priests. And then spoke, I thought, really beautifully about his own vocation as a husband and father. And he was choked up when he was speaking about his wife and how thankful he is for her vocation to be mother and homemaker. And I listened to it and I thought, wow, that's a beautiful speech. And the way he spoke about his wife was just so full of love and respecting her dignity. But it's received such backlash, hasn't it? And people have been saying, isn't it awful? And isn't he sexist?
The kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, who has got to be the most sexist, white supremacist dick I have ever seen in my life.
And what have you heard, Mark?
It was like something, the thing with Whoopi Goldberg on it in America.
Oh, The View.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
there was like this horrible thing. They absolutely went mad on it about him and said, like, basically saying that he's not a real Christian and that he's like part of a mad sect. And that was, I watched that interview before I listened to the speech, and then I went on and listened to Butker's speech. And I just thought it was really gentle and lovely and respectful. And you know, all right, he's got some traditionalist views, but you'd expect him, like, what's wrong with that? Why can't he have his own? And the backlash is, you know, all you can think is that there's quite a lot of demons out there that he seems to have really got their back up.
The twitch factor is high.
Yeah. Yes. Well, he began with the clergy. So he spoke about priests and said, think of them as fathers, which we should. And he said in the home, you have father and son, and priests lean too heavily. He was critical of priests leaning too heavily on the laity. And he said, which made me laugh, I don't know if you've all heard it, but he said, priests are spending too much time trying to take pictures of themselves with their dogs in matching outfits for the local parish bulletin, which was a bit harsh, but it was his way of saying the focus is wrong and that they're not being leaders, they're not being the priests that we need to be. His point was, if we're fathers and we're husbands and we're trying to do our things in the home, we need to be able to look to our priests and our bishops. And at the moment, we can't. He said they're concerned about the wrong things.
But make no mistake, before we even attempt to fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. The bishops and priests appointed by God as our spiritual fathers must be rightly ordered. There's not enough time today for me to list all the stories of priests and bishops misleading their flocks, but none of us can blame ignorance anymore and just blindly proclaim that that's what Father said. Because sadly, many priests we are looking to for leadership are the same ones who prioritize their hobbies or even photos with their dogs and matching outfits for the parish directory. It's easy for us laymen and women to think that in order for us to be holy, that we must be active in our parish and try to fix it. Yes, we absolutely should be involved in supporting our parishes, but we cannot be the source for our parish priests to lean on to help with their problems. Just as we look at the relationship between a father and his son, so too should we look at the relationship between a priest and his people. It would not be appropriate for me to always be looking to my son for help when it is my job as his father to lead him. St. Jose Maria Escriva states that priests are ordained to serve and should not yield to temptation to imitate lay people, but to be priests through and through. Tragically, so many priests revolve much of their happiness from the adulation they receive from their parishioners, and in searching for this, they let their guard down and become overly familiar. This undue familiarity will prove to be problematic every time, because as my teammate's girlfriend says, familiarity breeds contempt.
That seemed to be a direct dig. The only one I know who's done that is Bishop Rick Sticker, the Bishop of Knoxville, Tennessee, who's just been removed as a bishop after a vocations investigation. And he lives with Cardinal Regali, and he's famous for sending out Christmas cards with them both in matching jumpers with lots of little foo-foo dogs. So, I wonder if there's more bishops or priests who do that, but that certainly was the one that sprung to my mind.
But it was really, what I found in it, it was absolutely to the point. He cut through any nonsense. And it was a bit, you might say lines like that are a bit sharp, but necessarily so, I think. But he was tough on the bishops and then got criticism from those saying he was sexist. What did you think of it, Gav?
Well, I got into a row with one of our famous women theologians from Durham because I read what the nuns. So you probably know that there are nuns behind this foundation, and the nuns behind this foundation immediately released a statement saying they wanted nothing to do with this dreadful man, and then they created this piece of jargon which I thought was very odd. So when I said, well, here are the trousered nuns at it again. By trousered nuns, it's code word for progressive lesbians, really. And that's a terribly judgmental thing to say, and I apologise, but on the other hand, it's not entirely an uninformed thing to say, and they certainly behave like progressive lesbians because they're progressive and they're very much in favour of same-sex relationships. But I was told off immediately by this woman theologian from Durham, who, by the way, was personally invited by Pope Francis to the last synodal get-together as was one of the good guys, and she says, "How can you be so rude? These." And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you explain this phrase to me, the nuns used, then I'll back down a bit. So the nun said, our community has taught young women and men not just how to be homemakers in a limited sense, whatever that means, but rather how to make a gospel-centered, compassionate home within themselves, which then empowers them to be the best versions of themselves.
Oh, empowerment.
So here are all the buzzwords. It's all about becoming the best you can be. It's all about empowerment. We're straight back to the trousered feminist nuns, Jungian, narcissistic. It's all about me. But never, never let it be about raising children, forming children. Ripperger said in a small clip that he put out that forming the next generation, forming the hearts and the minds of our children is probably one of the most powerful and most potent things that anybody could ever do. And it's in the hands of the mothers. How anyone could say this is somehow homemaking in a limited sense is just extraordinary. So I think here we have the fault lines of what we're created to do, in one sense, against the alternative existential, power-dominated Nietzschean trousered nun version of being Christians.
Well, how many of you here have seen the speech or listened to it? I know it just came out before the weekend began, so not everybody.
Who's been on Twitter during the retreat?
Gavin. Gavin has.
Yes,
Well, so he's a young man. He's, I would say, I don't know, maybe 28, late 20s. And he said, because he said in his address, "I'm not much older than you, and they're just graduating." And the way he spoke, it'd be good if people listen to it and see what you think. But the way he spoke was so beautiful. And he began by saying, he spoke directly to the ladies in the room. He said, "Ladies, first of all, congratulations on all that you've achieved. You know, it's amazing. What you've done is wonderful. But you've been lied to." And then he said,
yes, very powerful.
he said, what you go on to do will be wonderful, but nothing will match your vocation to be a wife and a mother. He wasn't saying, "What the hell have you done wasting your time here for 4 years? Get into that kitchen now." So, but it's the way it's been presented. So you'd need to listen to how he actually spoke, because he then went on and really was choked up. He was almost in tears. And he said, "I'm able to be the man that I am today because of my wife, and because of how she makes the home and is primary educator of our children and helps me to be a better person. And our vocation to one another is to help get each other to heaven." Now, I'm struggling to see what in that we can say is so wrong, so offensive.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, Homemaker. She's a primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She's the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because I have seen it firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, "Heck no."
For those who've seen it here, does anyone want to say what your impressions of his speech were and whether you're surprised by the backlash against it? Paul, you said you'd seen it.
And or most of it. And I guess I thought it was very well expressed. I thought it was quite reasonable. I wasn't surprised by the backlash. I think that kind of thing triggers a certain reaction that you can anticipate these days. But I think it's good in that sense that it creates a forum for discussion around things that otherwise don't get discussed.
Why, those of you that have seen it, why do you think there was such a backlash? What do you think has created, if you can try and summarize it? I know it's not easy. What's created a situation where the instinct, the response is a negative one and that this is awful?
Well, in the States, for probably since the 80s, when women went back en masse into the workforce, because I was raising my children then too, there was a struggle between women who chose to work full-time versus women who were still staying at home. And even though the numbers of women that have gone into the workforce far exceeded any homemakers, they still have this extreme sense of, I'm not a good enough mother. In their own mind, they realize they are spending, they drop their kids off at 6 or 7 in the morning in a daycare center, go to work. They don't pick them up until 5:30 or 6. So that child is with another person for the bulk of their life. And I believe a lot of these mothers that did that because they always expressed, they would always outwardly say, this is the best thing for my child. My child is doing better because he has friends in a daycare center. And the way they said it, and with such emphasis and so often, told me they were feeling some kind of loss, some kind of guilt.
Yeah.
And so, and then that exacerbated the struggle between those who chose to stay home and those who went to work. Homemakers became just derided. And so this backlash, I mean, I was so proud when he said that.
Yeah.
But I knew immediately in the States it was going to just cause havoc. And that's exactly what it did, because it's exactly what I learned from women when I was raising my kids, what was going on between women in the States.
I think it's both sides, though, isn't it? Because like it's caused havoc, but at the same time they've sold all of his shirt, his number 7 shirt or whatever, is completely sold out there. So it's interesting because he's speaking against the narrative. This is one of the things that we were talking about this weekend. He's been brave enough to stand up, and he didn't want to do it. He says in the speech that he'd been convinced to do it by the principal of the school, and he'd said, look, I don't think it's my thing. And he'd said, oh, come on, please, you've got something to say to the culture. And so it looks very much as if he's been encouraged to do it, but they knew what they were doing by getting him to do that. It's not like he got up there and said something really radical that they weren't expecting. And that perhaps the results are exactly what we need, because it rattles the demons and wakes up the sleepers, and says, if you actually listen to what he said, you're going to go, wow, that's powerful. That makes sense to me. Or you're going to say, or if you've been, brainwashed by the culture or whatever, you're going to say, oh, that pushes against some of the narratives some of the paradigms that I believe in my life.
But there is something to be surprised about, because so we're dealing with capitalism, and capitalism is ruthless, and capitalism has drawn women into the workforce, and it produces some very, very hard choices, and we should be sympathetic for both men and women who are grist to the middle of capitalism. It's not easy to earn your living in an increasingly demanding capitalist society and fulfill your responsibilities, whatever they are. But what ought to happen, according to the values, self-professed values of our society, which are inclusive and relativistic, is there ought to be plenty of ways of doing that. So if you choose to be a full-time CEO as a woman, no one's going to criticize you. You're going to be praised for it. Absolutely fine. But if you choose to be at home and look after your mothers, why shouldn't you get be cut the same slack as the full-time CEO? Well, you're not earning very much money. You don't seem to be very important. You're not occupying a big place in society, but you've chosen to do that. Go ahead. But so far from being inclusive and diverse and relativistic, there's this vicious, you have no right to exist. You can't do that. We're going to cancel you and rub you out. It's as if, and I think one of the problems that homemakers have is they're constantly having to apologize, because instead of being told by people, is that your choice? You're entitled to make your choice. Good on you for your choice. Everybody else is complimented for their choice, except for women who stay at home and look after their children. So that tells us immediately that the rhetoric of our inclusive society isn't sincere. There's another agenda going on. And one of the things we discovered during the retreat, listening to Mrs. Bennett's talk on feminism, is what that agenda is. It's actually intended to destroy Judeo-Christian culture, whilst appearing on the surface to be something entirely benign. So the cover's been blown again. And I think that's why we're exercised about it.
You don't have to think very hard either, do you, about the way that the social model works in our society in the UK, where if they wanted to, like, if you've got both parents going out to work, you've immediately got the problem of childcare, and you see the government now promising more money to support childcare. Well, hey, here's a novel idea.
Yeah.
What about if parents looked after their own children? And like what I'm saying is, if you encourage those sorts of normal things going on in society, then you relieve some of the problems, some of the social problems we've got with children without parents, and the fact that parental responsibility will perhaps be increased because you've got that relationship. There are lots of interesting, potential things that could come out of that, and it's like this incredible tension where we're trying to break society, break the norms of society, and we're paying a price for that. And then there's this patch-up job with some of the social care or whatever that we're having to make, and it stretches society in all different ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, you said capitalism, but we know that the communists were very keen to get women out to work, out of the home, and this, we mentioned during this weekend Simone de Beauvoir, who said no woman should be authorised to stay at home and raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make it. And we spoke as well about that. There's always been that tension right from the earliest feminists of the cause that they believe in and then the instinct that they have as mothers. And that tension exists still today. And as you say, the thing is, the state have an interest in wanting to give you money to send your kids into childcare, because the state have control then. The state have control of the families and have control of the children. And they don't want to relinquish that and give it back into the home, back into the families. That's the society we live in. But we've got to a place where we think that's the norm. But of course, the norm is we're primary educators of our own children. The children are our children and ultimately belong to God. They're not the state's children. And so we do have to think about, with our faith, about policies that will support the family, and try and push for those policies that help.
I just want to defend myself a little bit, as if I was attacking capitalism, which I was, of course, but I wasn't attacking capitalism by suggesting that communism was better. You're quite right. Communism came straight out and said the state has primary responsibility for the children. And one of the reasons why we think we're moving towards a communist state in our own culture is because the state is increasingly telling parents what they can and can't do, and it's threatening even to outlaw home education. And that's a profoundly communist thing. But what I was saying, I think, was that capitalism, a bit like democracy, it's the least worst system. I mean, capitalism, as Jordan Peterson has been saying recently, has raised untold numbers out of poverty. It's been enormously effective, but it comes at a very, very high price. And I was talking about the high price. Do you remember, either of you, the political program that Chesterton and Belloc proposed? Was it distributism?
Yes.
Was it?
Yes.
Can someone better educated than me talk about it?
I think
Paul, go ahead.
Distributism is the idea that everyone should have a stake in capitalism. So everyone should have some ownership, even if they're small enterprise, within their job, rather than it being so unequally distributed, and that everyone would then buy into it. So it's a kind of a middle way.
A humanized capitalism.
Yeah.
Let's call it the Waitrose model.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention it because I'm not anti-capitalist, but I know that both Belloc and Chesterton did some thinking about this, and I'm very briefly, I've read pros and cons, but it seemed to me that at least if we're going to criticize capitalism, we ought to do it on the basis that we might try and improve it. And Chester Belloc did try and improve it.
Chesterton called it distributism.
Yeah.
And felt that, and that's where people misunderstood when he originally discussed the problem, because they thought he was giving them or promoting a veiled communism.
Right.
Because he said that, the workers should be the ones that share in what they produce, which is really the opposite of communism, because they say that's what you're going to do. But the government controls, as you say, the education of children. The government controls kind of homes that you can afford to buy. They control all, everything. But Chesterton said it's a mild form of capitalism, and he wanted to empower I don't like that word because it's feminine.
Yes.
To give workers a share in the profits. In the States, we have a company that do that, where you have profit sharing. So the longer you work for them, you have a share in the business by the time you retire. Well, that was kind of Chesterton's idea. He felt that workers should be the ones that actually make the decisions too about, what kind of hours should we have in our stores, or what kind of how many hours should the workers work, etc. Things like that. So that owner, so that worker could feel the pride and get satisfaction, not just monetarily, but from being supporting and providing this business for the community. So it was really, that's where people thought, oh no, it's communism. No, it's not, because he wanted workers. Work in the Catholic sense is holy.
Yeah.
It's a prayer. It can be our prayer.
Yeah.
And Chesterton knew that. And that's why he wanted to set up this way of living and way of working where workers knew, as St. Paul says, pray constantly.
And this was very much, I think, at the heart of this young man, Harrison Butker, who was taking that view very much that it's everything we do is a prayer. It's about our vocation. It's about doing what we do to the best of our ability. But it wasn't just women who came in for what the critics are calling a battering. He also, because of course it's lopsided. So they're not giving the full story, because he then went on and said, men, come on, men, you've been lied to as well. You've been told that you're toxic and not necessary. And but he reminded them that men, we set the tone for the culture, and you need to be unapologetic in your masculinity. So it's a call to the young men and the young women.
To the gentlemen here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture, and when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better.
And again, I think we've spoken about this before. This is something that young people need to hear. Young men and young women need to be reminded that they've been created as male and as female. And whilst both perfectly capable and equally valuable, there are a reason that we're different. We have to look into what that difference is and how we can live that out.
I'm very impressed with this new way of doing unscripted with our consultants, our theologians, who know much more about distributism than I do. We should have you on tap, I think.
Put your hands up if you've got a question you'd like to ask.
About this or about everything?
Yeah, about everything.
Well, I've just got a statement, really, and it's very your apologetic aspect. That we have, as Christians, we have just become very apologetic about Christianity, and partly as well, because we've become social, if you like, instead of talking religious and recognizing that the root of it all is Satan. We've become part of the political discourse rather than a religious discourse.
We're terrified, aren't we? I mean, and again, there aren't enough voices saying whether you like it or not. You don't have to have it, but this is the Catholic view, and that's one of the things that's missing. So there's a vacuum, and perhaps it's no surprise that the secular, progressive, growingly totalitarian voice is filling the vacuum. Yes, well, this is an attempt to fill the vacuum as well. So thank you. Yes.
Well, of course, because we're in a spiritual battle, and that's what actually the theme of this weekend that wasn't necessarily planned but has clearly come out in all the discussions and conversations is exactly that we've lost that supernatural, we've lost that ability to speak about the demonic, about the spiritual attacks, and actually one of the first things we came together on Friday evening and sat around, and to be in the company of people who get that is really remarkable, and you realise that's what's missing. We need to be able to speak about the fact that there's a spiritual dimension to this, if we're going to be able to. But it's baby steps, because the culture is so, for hundreds of years been so far removed. It's been stripped away. That vertical has been stripped away, and everything is horizontal. So again, it's back to that re-enchantment. But absolutely, that's what's needed.
And I'd just like to say one of the great things that's come from having sharing companies is some of you have said we no longer feel we're quite so alone. But I think we feel we're no longer quite so alone, because having been able to meet you and talk to you and find that, to our astonishment, we're really simply all on the same wavelength. And it's very encouraging. And I feel substantially less strange now than I did before the weekend.
If I turn the mic on the back, would that pick up Simon?
Okay, I've found in circles in which I regularly find myself, and they're not like us, they're not Catholics, some of them are not, they don't believe at all. But what I've found in these circles is a huge hunger and a huge awareness of something missing from their lives. And in this circle, when we talk informally and share our lives, they're very surprised, having heard, "Oh, I'm an atheist," or "I don't believe," or I believe in something else. If one actually says, "I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, I believe in the Trinity, I believe in God, I believe in the magisterium, I believe in the teachings of the church, and I want to be a saint," and there's a stunned silence. And people laugh, and they look a bit nervous. But afterwards they come up to you and say, "Yeah, we get it." And that's worth it. You've got to stand up. You've got to be heard. You've got to have ambition. You've got to just go for it. End on. Thanks.
There is a purpose to our lives is appealing because it's coherent. Without a purpose, it's just chaos, isn't it? Well, we're here, and then what? So that's what I think people might have picked up on in your wedding, in the way we witness and live our lives, is we're people with purpose. We know what we're about.
And we're about going to a Pentecost Mass.
Has everyone enjoyed the retreat, though? Has everyone?
Yes, that's when I hold up a cue card. Yes, time.
Well, I think we've been really pleased that everyone seems to have formed a little community, and there's been great discussion, and everyone's been very engaged. So we'd like to say thank you very much.
Absolutely.
For your kind attention and for coming and for being part of this whole project with us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It really has been.
Can you can that applause and we can use it every time? End of each unscripted.
Right, well, for now, that's it. Thanks for watching. Do visit the website catholicunscripted.com. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashland, and happy Pentecost. Can you can that applause and we can use it every time? End of each unscripted.
Right, well, for now, that's it. Thanks for watching. Do visit the website catholicunscripted.com. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashland, and happy Pentecost.
Right, thanks, guys.